Resources for Immigrants is a private organization that provides information on relearning, rebuilding, and resettling for immigrants in Canada. The organization partners with several other organizations and businesses to offer quality services to immigrants in Calgary, Alberta. Since it was founded in June 2020, Resources for Immigrants has served over 300 immigrants, offering valuable and timely information on career development, education, immigration, and settlement, thereby changing one life at a time. You can read more about us at www.resourcesforimmigrants.ca. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Also, we have a lot of information for you on YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe. The quickest way to contact us is through our email address, hello@resourcesforimmigrants.ca. Hi, Rowan. So nice to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me today. This was just awesome.
Wonderful. So I know a lot about Fisher Law, but I would just like you to maybe tell us a little more about, your journey and what Fisher Law does in the community.
Sure, absolutely. So Fisher Law is an immigration and refugee law firm. We're based in Calgary, Alberta, but we have lawyers in Calgary, in Edmonton, in Yukon, in Dubai. And we work with clients all over the globe and in Canada. So our practice is kind of split into two sides. For outside Canada, we do both business immigration law and personal immigration law. And so on the business side, if somebody owns a business overseas and they want to open a business in Canada as like an immigration vehicle, we can assist them to do that and basically start their business and their family life in Canada. Then we also do personal immigration. So we do all the temporary and all of the permanent resident applications coming in from anyone from outside Canada. Then the other side of the practice is inside Canada. And again, we work with businesses inside Canada. So if somebody knows a business inside Canada that they'd really like to work for, we can assist that business to get the certifications they need to hire foreign workers. And then of course, inside Canada for the permanent residents, we also help them transitioning between different status levels. Maybe if they have some problems with status, maybe they're losing their status for some reason and those kinds of issues, we can also help them for them. So really, we can do pretty much anything in immigration.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I'm just excited that we're having you today because I have so many questions. I've been so curious about work permits, and I would just like us to dig a little deeper into work permits. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Let's talk about
Wonderful.
work permits because I know so many people, are really, really interested in that right now. Especially now also that a big change happened this week in permits where they're actually allowing the families of lots of permit holders who are not able to come before to come and join them here. Wonderful. So there's quite a change now. So this is a great day to talk about temporary work permits.
Wow, wonderful. And thank you for saying all these things because I've been curious. The world of immigration changes so fast because the rules that we saw maybe even last month or last year now seems like things have changed.
Yeah, so much. And that's a really important thing. Actually, I'm really glad you brought that up because so for today, we're going to talk about immigration that we know about what it looks like today.
Yeah.
It changes all the time. Policy changes overnight, sometimes with no notice. So it's really important to know that like all the information that I'm giving today is general information. This is not legal advice. This is general information, mostly from government websites. So IRCC, ESDC, all kinds of other websites. And so it's not really legal advice in the sense of a lawyer giving you personal advice. This is general public knowledge that I'm just putting together for everyone to make it a little bit easier. If people want more information like on their individual situation, then they really need to book in with us and spend some time with a lawyer to investigate their education, their English, their background, their whole history, their reasons for coming to Canada, and then like when to best make those applications because really eligibility is the most important thing. And because these things change so often, you really have to look at the legislation, you have to look at the policies right when that person is close to applying. We really want to make sure we get the right information. So today's information, everyone just needs to like look at the date, you know, when we're recording this. You know, at the moment we're looking at December 4th, 2022. And so the information is really up to date to this point. And just we want to make sure people get the best advice they can, so it must be updated advice.
So let's start talking about temporary work permits.
Sure.
What is a closed or employer-specific work permit?
Okay, so the first thing to know about closed or employer-specific, and I use both terms because people use them sort of interchangeably, is to know that what it is a work permit that really is closed to an employer. So you have been employed by that one employer in that one location, often for specific hours of work, specific days of work, and specific amounts of money. And those are locked into your permit. And so when you arrive in Canada, you really, really have to pay attention. What are these conditions on my closed work permit? Because otherwise you could fall to the wrong side, you know, of the immigration authorities, because you're then in breach of your work permit. And you never want to be in that situation, okay? So it's really important to know that these closed work permits are very specific, which is why people call them specific work permits. It's a really great way to come to Canada if you do not yet meet the criteria to come for permanent residence. Because working temporarily in Canada, if it's set up properly, can then lead to permanent residency. So we look at people who are like, I want to come in under the Express Entry Program, or I want to come in under the Alberta Opportunity Stream. And it's like, that's great. Love that you want to do that, but you're actually not eligible yet. You don't meet all the various criteria for permanent residency yet. So then we want to look at, well, is it possible for this person to get a job offer from an employer in Canada and then work for that employer for a specific amount of time? Maybe work on English, maybe work on some educational criteria, maybe just get work hours behind them to be able to reach that eligibility for permanent residence. And then we are able to bring that person in once they have their job offer or their offer of employment and have a look at, oh, now what are the next steps, right? We're always trying to look for a path. People often think of immigration as this like one-shot deal. Okay, I just need to get into Canada. If I could just get into Canada, that's what I need to do. And it's like, yeah, of course. But what really needs done is some planning. What really needs done is like, okay, so once you're in Canada, then what? Right? And so it's really important for people to think in the long term and what they want from their lives and their families' lives when they're coming to Canada. So these temporary permits are wonderful, but they're just part of the plan, right? And so we want to get people in on those permits and then get them in on permanent residency after that.
Wonderful. Wow. And how can someone apply for these work permits, especially from outside of Canada?
Okay, so these are online applications. So some people feel really comfortable doing their own applications and they just want to go ahead and do that. So they come to us, they have a consultation, we give them the information that they need, and then they go ahead and do their own application. That's perfectly fine. Some people find that a little bit intimidating because if you make mistakes on those applications, they may be refused. Or maybe some people just don't have the time to do that in their lives, because these can be fairly intensive applications. So really it's a bit of, you know, wanting to apply from outside of Canada. You want to make sure you're applying through the online system, doing it yourself if you're capable of it, or getting a representative if you don't. The thing about applying for the application is you want to make sure that you demonstrate certain things. There's certain specific parts of the application that the immigration officers are really going to look at, right, and really going to spot. So the kinds of things you want to look at is you want to make sure you show that you're going to leave Canada at the end of your employment. Okay, these are temporary permits. That means you are only planning to stay here for a while to work. Now, of course we know, and most of our clients come here, they want to stay in Canada and become permanent residents. But for the purpose of a temporary work permit, you have to tell the government and really demonstrate that you really are only going to be here for a short time. So you want to make sure also that you demonstrate that you're not a threat to the safety or security of Canada and Canadians. And to do that, you get a police clearance certificate from your local police station. And police stations do these regularly, and police agencies do these regularly. And so it demonstrates this. Now, in some countries, there may be issues acquiring these, but Canada does know which ones those are. So if you're in a country for any reason that all of a sudden you cannot get a police clearance certificate to show you don't have a criminal record because of a situation politically, or like war or something like that in your country, you just have to explain that in the letter. And the Canadian authorities are pretty on top of what's going on politically around the globe. So they may give you a pass on that for a little while, but you really have to argue carefully. So this is another situation where you might want someone helping you with your application, is if you're missing any documents off the document checklist. You want to watch your health as well, because there is a health exam required. Canada doesn't want any temporary foreign workers to be a burden on the social welfare system. So we have a wonderful Medicare system in Canada where our taxes go towards our medical services that we require. So people talk about free Medicare. Okay, it's not free. Canadians pay for it by taxes, but you don't have to pay when you go and get your medical care. Most Medicare, not all, there's lots you need to pay for still. So with temporary foreign workers, most temporary foreign workers coming in from another country will be required to do a medical exam as like part of this sort of application and staying in Canada process. There is a threshold, an actual amount of money that the government publishes every year that says if your medical needs require the Canadian government to pay more than this money, you will be inadmissible to Canada. Okay, so you have to be really quite healthy to be able to come to be a temporary worker. It's one of the requirements, because you're only here and you're here to work. That is the thing. That's why you're here. So you got to be healthy to work. So they're very cautious about that. And you just want to make sure the employer you're working for is not on the in or not eligible list. There is a list of all kinds of jobs related to striptease, exotic dancing, some forms of massage, of course, that are not permitted on temporary foreign work permits. And there's also a number of employers who are on what we call the naughty list. So they have somehow in the past been in violation of their certificate to be able to hire temporary foreign workers, and they're not supposed to hire anyone. So you want to double check the naughty list, the ineligible list, always before you apply. So applying from outside Canada is a process most people do. Most people are not applying for work permits from inside Canada for temporary foreign work permits on first instance. They are applying from outside Canada. So it is possible as long as you have the energy and time to do it, and as long as you understand that if there's any hurdles at all, if there's any problems with your application, to really get someone to help you as soon as possible.
Wow. So guys, you heard it. Make sure that your employer is not on the naughty list. So you've said that most people that apply for these temp jobs are outside of the country. But is it a possibility to apply for a temp job from the port of entry?
Yes. Okay.
What does that involve?
So applying at the port of entry. So just so everyone knows, the port of entry means the place you enter the country. So that's generally coming from overseas to Canada, an airport. Although, of course, we have this big, long border with the United States, and there are ports of entry all the way along that border. So it just means the place you enter. So to apply at a port of entry, the first thing to know is that it's risky. Especially as a first instance application for temporary foreign work permit. And the reason why is the officers at the border have a great deal of discretion. They get to decide. They are the decision makers on whether or not they allow you in the country or not. If there are any problems with your application at the border at all, they will refuse it, and they will send you home. And you have spent all this time, money, energy, organizing your whole life to come to Canada, only to get to the border and apply for something, and then you get sent home. So we only recommend for people coming in from outside Canada for a preliminary or first application to really do it online from your own country. Make sure there's no issues with that application before you get to a port of entry. Now, it is possible for some visas. So there are some temporary visas that are LMIA exempt. So there are visas where or permits where the employer does not actually need to have certification from the government in advance to hire a temporary foreign worker. Some of those are business, sort of high-end, high-skilled, temporary permits for someone coming in for a very short contract or a very short project, for example. So there are people that we will bring in to do their first initial application at the port of entry, but you really, if you're just coming in on a regular LMIA, temporary foreign work permit, I would strongly advise applying from overseas. If you're thinking of doing, or you think you may qualify, or you think it may be simpler for you to do it at a port of entry, please, again, get reliable advice from an immigration professional.